Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Crossover U podcast brought to you by the Crossover Media Network. My name is Kanaye and today I'm joined by Josh, and we're going to be breaking down an incredible week in college basketball last week with Feast Week, all the MTEs going down, the Players Era Festival, and it was just a really great overall week for college hoops. A lot of upsets, a lot of teams shifting in the AP poll, which just came out yesterday. A lot of movement in that, so we're going to be breaking that down today. And let's get started by talking about some of the MTs and big games that happened during Feast Week last week. I guess we could get started off with the Maui Invitational. Auburn ultimately won that pretty handedly. They won most of their games pretty comfortably. That Iowa State game was a thriller, and they had that big comeback. But other than that, no one really stood much of a chance against them. And of course, another big storyline was UConn going 0-3 in that tournament. And, that's definitely something that's going to be a thing to watch going forward, see if UConn can recoup, bounce back. But, there's also been some other surprising teams that played pretty well in that tournament. Dayton, they probably should have won two games, if we're being honest. They kept it really close with Iowa State, and then obviously they ended up routing UConn pretty easily. But, yeah, they had a large lead on UNC too, and probably should have won that game, but ultimately lost. So I mean, Josh, you have anything you want to say
I
about the
definitely
Maui?
like
Anything
the
that stood out to you?
I definitely think the data intake is very strong, and it's definitely a program that's being ignored right now. Obviously, it was the only mid-major, other than Memphis, the only mid-major to really be questioned into Maui, and we didn't really think much of the team. Yeah, they technically did only win against UConn, but regardless, their efforts have been very solid. And this is a team that could dominate not just in mid-major play in their own conference in the against other mid-major competition, but also forwarding into what we'd assume to be March, they could probably compete on that level as well. And we could see a very similar season to last year, where they also made the tournament and could perhaps move on past what we had really previously assumed was a better team. Like I really enjoyed the just general playmaking of guys like Zed Key, Santos, really just this generalized organization they have. It felt different than what I was
Yeah,
expecting to see. And obviously, just in general with the mid majors as well, Memphis showed something incredible. I mean, we've said it for like the longest period of time, basically, anyone who's been watching college basketball has known. Penny Hardaway has been trying to make a splash in March. This might be the year. They were ranked in the top 20 as of this week's AP poll, which we'll get to later. And for the most part, the team showed a lot of good moments. Dane Danger, PJ Haggerty, Penny Hardaway is really producing on a level that we haven't seen him do before. And the win against UConn, Michigan State, even the loss to Auburn, it definitely showed something different. And, the American is very open for them. So watch out for Memphis.
yeah. I mean, I definitely agree. It seems like Penny Hardaway's finally figured out some type of formula that he could run with. I mean, their guards have great size. You mentioned Haggerty, Tyrese Hunter. She shot the ball amazing
Tyrese
throughout
Hunter's
the
great.
Maui. And yeah, Dane Dage down low. That was a really big pickup for them in the portal. That I think a lot of people probably weren't really aware of. And I think that was, his play in the Maui, especially that UConn game going back and forth with Terrace Reed, that was really fun to watch. And, he's a good player. And yeah, like you mentioned, the American, I don't see why Memphis doesn't tear through the American this year and possibly put themselves in a position to get a top three seed.
I agree. Yeah, they're definitely a dark horse team to not just do that, but also make the Final Four. Like this
Yeah,
might be the saving season of Hardaway's year
yeah,
or his
definitely.
coaching tenure at Memphis, which was really put on hot water in recent seasons. Now is that year. Now is
Right,
that opportunity. I think it is still early, but this Maui Invitational showed a lot of opportunities.
definitely.
Um, and
And
then
um, what were your thoughts on Michigan State, how they played in this tournament? They picked up a big win beating UNC. It's a pretty big upset.
I think
And
that was very solid.
yeah,
Um, I mean, it also just depends on how UNC is as a team overall. I
right.
wasn't really impressed by them this Maui Invitational. I mean, They haven't really had the moments that I thought they could have had,
Yeah,
especially when they were picked to win the ACC this year, and that's kind of put on ice as of recent. I think there's definitely consideration there. Overall, though, Michigan State, it's Izzo. I'm not expecting anything different from him. He'll make the tournament like he always does. It just depends where they are seed wise. Last year, they had a really bad fall off. This year, I think he's learning from his mistakes, and as a team, they are. And there's growth. Cohen Carr has come alive. What was supposed to be a freshman, standout year is turning into a possible sophomore sensation.
yeah,
he is
definitely.
turning into a lead player behind Xavier Booker, and could be a dark horse team in the Big Ten.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the most I can say.
I mean, I just think Michigan State goes as Jaden Atkin goes. That's a guy they need to show up every night. He's the leading scorer returning from last year, and he's a guy that needs to be able to go out there and get you a bucket when you need him to. And I think overall, if they can shoot the ball, if they can hit shots, then they're a really good team. But if they can't, then it gets a little ugly. And I think they need to look to try to play in transition a little more. It'll benefit players like a Cohen Carr who can get out and rim run. And then, I think you look for guys like Jackson Kohler in the post to be able to contribute. I mean, he's done a fair job at, but I think maybe just a little bit more you'd like to see out of him. He played well in that game against Kansas a few weeks back, but I think it was a little quiet in the Maui. But yeah, and kind of going back to UNC, I think the problems with UNC really just trail back to the concerns most people had regarding this team heading into the season, how they needed a big and didn't address that need. I mean, I just think, losing Armando Baycott is absolute blow to the program. They just don't have the rebounding and interior presence that they've had in the past years. And, I think they missed on Cade Tyson. I think they thought Cade Tyson was going to be a guy, and he's just not. He's just struggled up to this point, and that's kind of been a theme with a lot of transfers so far this year. A lot of transfers really haven't a lot of the hyped up transfers haven't really played to expectations for a lot of the high major schools and a couple blue bloods, and they haven't really shown up. But yeah. So moving on from the Maui, let's talk a little about the Players Era Festival, which was first of its kind, completely based around NIL, which is obviously going to be the direction of the sport moving forward. I think we're going to see a lot less of these MTEs going forward, and just because, I mean, NIL's that's the calling to the game now. Like, all these schools are worried about is making NIL, getting money for NIL for their players to recruit freshmen, recruit transfers, and these schools aren't getting that in these MTs. But you play in an event like a Players Era Festival, or you play a home and home, just single games against big ranked opponents. That'll bring in a lot more money for these schools, and I think that brings into the question that can tournaments like the Maui Invitational continue to survive in this era of NIL? So that's something that will be interesting to see in years to come. But yeah, let's talk about the Players Era
Yeah,
Festival.
I definitely agree with you as well. I think this is a groundbreaking tournament. I do enjoy the opportunity of this, and it definitely worked in its first year because first off, the slate was very solid. It had a pretty much an open ground in between the teams. I do think obviously the level of competition was a little bit deviated. Obviously, Notre Dame didn't really stack up to where I was originally thinking they were going to go, for example. But overall, we got some great matchups. Houston, Alabama was well worth it, and I really enjoyed it. So was Alabama, Oregon. So was Houston, San Diego State. I think and I think it really exposed a lot of honestly issues with most teams. I think
Yeah, definitely.
Alabama had just some like really concerning problems with shooting overall. I thought this team was going to be a lot better, or at least on par with their shooting from last year. It just hasn't really shown the same way. The defense is still lacking as well, by the way. And regardless of what you think about the ending between Oregon, this team does concern me slightly, and my view on them winning the SEC has pretty much changed uh, due to obviously their losses and Auburn's influence. So, you can definitely put that in. I think Houston definitely concerns me as well. I really didn't think they were going to have this issue, but they have now racked up 3 losses. through 7 games, which is dreadfully concerning for a team like this one. And Kelvin Sampson does have his work out for him. I know he has the opportunity to, but guys like LJ Cryer, he needs to step up to the level Jamal Shed was. It's going to be hard. I think
Yeah,
it's going to be a little harder than I thought it was going to look. And the Big 12 conference schedule, it's coming up. Like they need to
right.
start getting some good non-conference wins soon before it becomes a big issue.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and then Creighton's also in the same spot. I really thought
Yeah,
there was be more. Kalkbrenner had a moment earlier in the year, and it's kind of fading. I don't really know what to think about Creighton at the moment. I'll leave them blank because I do think San Diego State is a good team as well, as we've seen from this, uh, this Players Festival. But
right.
I don't know. But I will
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
go
I
ahead.
will give big props to 2 teams. Oregon's the big one. Obviously, they
Right.
won
Of
the
course.
Invitational Festival. The team that I really didn't expect, but also thought could do it. They're another dark horse for the Big Ten. They have the talent. They have the 3-point shooting, which is a huge deal for them. And they're if they're competing with Alabama on a non-conference, neutral zone, that bodes very well for them going into future Big Ten and even March related events. Like they rose so much in the AP poll. They're what, 12, 13? They're very high,
Yeah,
which I think is fair. And then I'd
yeah,
also like to give my flowers to Rutgers.
right.
They've had a
Definitely.
really up and down season. Obviously, we could talk about the Kennesaw State game. I think that's more or less a bubble in its own mind, but they played
I
very
mean,
well against Notre Dame, well against was it Houston they ended up playing afterwards?
Alabama, I
Alabama,
believe.
yes. I,
Yeah, they went
I
to the
think
wire with them
even yes,
too.
and I think yes, like if they're playing competitive, this team does provide a lot, and they should make March. I think, and I also think
Yeah,
that Dylan Harper's balling out. He
yeah.
is
Dylan
just
Harper. Dylan Harper has definitely established himself as a star in the sport. That this is a guy who's legit, and I think is definitely on All American watch as of right now. I mean,
not
I don't
just on
know if
American Watch.
yeah,
He's like
he could
he's
be on the
legit.
koozie. He's definitely on the koozie watch too. I mean, he looks like both him and Ace Bailey, I think, could give Cooper Flag a legit run for that number 1 pick in this year's draft.
And I definitely agree with you on that part. And I think it's definitely a good bounce back from those that loss to Kennesaw State. And I think there are definitely some big roads ahead for the team.
Yeah.
What other tournaments do you think are worth talking about?
Yeah. I think before we get into that, I just want to talk about just like some things I noticed from like the players era, just a little bouncing off a few of your points. Yeah. So I mean, Rutgers, they look like a team that can definitely compete for a spot. I think they will get it, end up making a clinching a tournament appearance this year. Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey really established themselves as top of the line freshmen in this class so far this year. With Creighton, I know they've struggled. They've had some pretty bad losses to some unranked teams, but I think it's important to mention that they're also without Stephen Ashworth, who got hurt a few games get back. I forget against who. I want to say it was Nebraska. Yes, against Nebraska. And yeah, that's a huge loss for them not having their point guard. And I understand I've talked about the height limitations of Stephen Ashworth, but I mean, still to have a 5th-year grad player playing the point, that's like it's pretty important for them not to have that. I don't think Pop Isaacs really fills that role very well as more of a scorer. So I think you hope if you're a Creighton fan that he gets healthy before Big East play, and I think from what I've heard he should be, or he could be playing this week for all I know. But yeah, and then like Alabama, yeah, I think for a Nate Oates team, you need the shooting. That's his whole system. They need to be able to shoot the three. They were able to last year, and when they get hot, they look like one of the best teams in the country, if not the best team. And when they're not hitting shots, they don't look great. And some unfortunate news for them. They just lost Latrell Right Cell for the year.
Yeah,
I
I
believe with
just
a
heard
torn
about that.
ACL, so that's
That
tough.
was
And I think if you're a Bama fan, you hope Chris Youngblood can get healthy and back soon because we haven't seen him in action and playing for the Crimson Tide yet. So I mean that's something I guess you hope to look forward to. But yeah, I think that's everything that I really took away from the Players era.
I hear
So
you.
yeah, uh, were there? Yeah. So going back to you, were there any other thoughts you
I
had about any
think
of these MTEs or?
I think the battle for Atlantis was another good one. We saw honestly a lot more movement than I thought. Louisville is definitely they're
Yeah.
back.
Right.
Pat
They
Halsey
are.
has really returned Louisville to a reasonable status. The huge win against IU is a big
Yeah.
success
Definitely.
point. Gonzaga fell to
West
uh,
Virginia.
yeah, I think definitely the DeVries connection is kind of
Yeah.
making its point. Do I think that was a fluke? Maybe because they didn't because West Virginia didn't really play anything better since. Although they did have a nice win against Arizona, but
Yeah.
that's Arizona's not really on the level that any of those other teams are at the moment. So I really can't say too much.
Definitely.
Overall,
Yeah.
though, I think there's definitely a lot of questions on really all of these teams, and IU included, which fell out of rankings this week because of that just horrible loss and just their
Right.
inability to bounce back against later teams. Um, I think overall, though, it's not horrific to say that a team like Gonzaga is not prepared for March, but they do have a bountiful schedule ahead of them, and they should have a ton of time to learn from the issues. And I think Ryan Nemhard is stepping up. He
Yeah.
has a
Definitely.
great opportunity, and if he can lead the team alongside Graham Ike, who also needs to step up, then I think this loss can be put down the drain. And I will also give my flowers to Oklahoma. They love surprising us in the first part of the year.
Yeah.
Oklahoma did
They
the
do.
same thing last year. They're back in the rankings. They're undefeated. They had some good wins. I just don't know if it's gonna stay. They like always fall off towards the end of the year, and Big 12 play or SEC play, I should say, might challenge their viewpoints. So we'll see how it goes. But I think the Battle for Linus was very underrated. I think the Rady Children's Invitational was nice. Purdue had a great win against Old Miss, who Old Miss they proved themselves with a great win over BYU. So definitely like within the lists of tournaments, they were pretty solid ones. And then individual games, I think it's worth talking about Kansas and Duke because that was
Yeah.
not
Definitely.
only a great game, but just a great learning experience for Cooper Flag and Co. And
Yeah.
also kind of Duke or kind of Kansas as well because we have to talk about like for example the ejection of
Right. I mean,
Dickinson, which
yeah. I mean, I think that's really encouraging that you're still able to find a way to come out on top in the game, losing Hunter Dickinson for what was it, nearly the entire second half, right?
yes, and I think
Yeah.
obviously there are definitely some interesting viewpoints on not just the ejection but just the generalized ability of Kansas to work as a team without their top players. I think Zeke Mayo filled in that role perfectly when
Yeah.
Dickinson was out, and I think that meant a lot. But he also, obviously we have to look at the unfortunate timings of both Connuple and Cooper Flag, who had
Yeah.
both late game
I mean,
turnovers. It's a
that's just, I don't know. That I just think it goes back to the Kentucky game. Like, I don't know what John Shire is doing with his late game play calling and like what his late game execution. Like, it makes no sense to me to have Cooper Flag bring the ball up the court when you're in a position where you have to take a shot to take the lead or tie the game. You should. I don't understand. You have Caleb Foster. Why not have Caleb Foster bring the ball up to set one of those guys up to get a shot? Because Cooper Flag brings the ball. They know Cooper is going to take that shot. You're just putting him in a position not to. You're just not putting him in a position to succeed. And I'm granted, I'm not the biggest. I don't like Duke very much, but I'm not a believer in John Shire. I don't think John Shire is capable of winning the big game. Um, and I mean, I just think you have such talented players. Like, I mean, going back to the Kentucky game, I understand Cooper Flag was having a really good game, but I mean, Con Knapp was shooting the lights out too. Even if you have Flag bring the ball up, why not run a set where you get Kneppel a shot, or someone like actually Kamon Malak? I think he cramped up in that game, so he wasn't available for
Yeah,
that.
there were definitely some issues. Like I know Sion
Yeah,
James had an issue as well. But there were points like they had Mason Gillis with a great opportunity as well, and they never used their 3-point opportunities. And even if the cons to the game to overtime, I still don't think they would have closed it out, which is really, I think that's Shire's biggest issue. Shire right
Yeah,
now is having a problem, and Duke is having a problem in general just closing out their games. They
definitely.
very
Yeah,
much could have closed out both of these wins and would have had a huge opportunity to probably take, the one seed, just not
yeah,
just
for
rankings,
sure.
but overall. And while I don't think that necessarily removes them from such an opportunity, I think looking back, especially at the end of the season, when we have to do our general rankings and find out where Duke places themselves seed wise,
Right.
these losses will be reminders of possible opportunities to be in the top spot. Do I
Yeah.
think they continue? Honestly, perhaps, because I thought that the Kentucky thing was a fluke, but now I'm not so sure. Um, Duke does have some great opportunities later on. Conference play will obviously be a big deal. If they can clutch up and defeat UNC or whatever team gets in their way and win the ACC, my mind might be changed. But right now, they're in a dark place because this is very much like a Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett type of 2019 season, but it's not
Yeah.
starting the way that they did, and
Right. Right.
that's very concerning.
It is, and I just think something on. I think they need someone to emerge as a guy, like another dude who can come in and get you a bucket. Like I think you want that person to be Sion James. I understand, he's kind of battled a little bit of I can't remember. It might have been with his calf or no, it was his shoulder, and I think he got hurt in that Kentucky game. But yeah, they just need another guy to emerge. I mean, I understand your freshmen are your best players; they have to start. That is what it is. But it's just tough to rely, as good as they are. It's tough to rely on freshmen to be able to completely carry you at this in this current state of college basketball right now, when you have 22, 23-year olds playing with the COVID year and the fifth year eligibility, and it's a lot. You need, and I give Shire credit. He did a really good job in the portal addressing getting veteran talent with Mason Gillis, Malik Brown, and Sion James. But I think you want to see more from those guys. I understand, a guy like Malik Brown, he's not going to score. He's there to play defense, and to do the little things. And he does a great job at that. And but I think you'd like to see Mason Gillis shoot it a little better than what he's been doing. And then I think Sion James needs to be able to do a little bit more for them offensively.
Yeah, I definitely hear you, and I also definitely, I think that game is not necessarily a defining point, but
Yeah,
it
yeah, definitely
it
not.
definitely it gives a lot of opportunities for Duke to learn that I don't think the Kentucky game had. And to be completely honest with you, I think this also shows a lot about Kansas's almost weaknesses because while they have played great competition, they do have a deserving place to be the current number one team. There is a concern. There is a concern with can Kansas keep up? I will say the Big 12 does look a little bit better uh, this week compared to last week. Now that Arizona's kind
Mhm.
of faded a little bit, Houston's kind of faded a little bit. We'll see how Baylor does the rest of the non-conference schedule. So
Right,
Kansas might still be the front runner for the conference title, but even then, it's touch and go. It's touch and go,
right.
and Auburn might be inevitable. They might
Yeah,
be. I think also like I have two other nice like individual games. I think Arkansas and Illinois was a good one.
yeah,
Uh,
definitely was. I mean, Coach Cal, he's just,
yeah,
I deep down, I think I knew he was never going to change, but part of me wanted to think, okay, maybe Cal's in a new place. He's going to bring a new type of energy to his coaching style, but no, he's same old Cal.
yeah. It's hard to change him, and to be honest with you, like it felt a little bit like a trap game for Arkansas, considering that while it was technically on neutral ground and it was in between the two schools, it felt like Illinois had the advantage going in, and it definitely
Yeah,
showed. They had great opportunities from their freshman core, which is very surprising. I think this team has a lot more opportunities than I thought they were, and they're kind of in a spot to be, once again, another dark horse. There's a lot of dark horses in the Big Ten, I feel.
yeah, definitely. I
Um,
mean, Illinois looked really, really good, but it's just like at the same time, I mean, they were just taking Arkansas gave them that game. I mean, they're playing drop coverage on. I mean, the shooters Illinois have, they shoot the piss out of the ball. Like you're
yeah.
playing drop coverage every time on the screens, and you're like, what Illinois is going to run. You don't change anything you're doing defensively. That's just it's just a fault on Cal. Like yeah, he has a talent year in and year out. It's just the coaching's not there, and he doesn't
True.
coach his rosters to reach the potential that they really could. But yeah, that's just all on Cal. He's got to figure it out, and I don't think he ever. I don't know if he ever will. I don't think he will. But that is what it
It'll
is.
definitely be rough for him. He has a
Yeah,
lot of work cut out for, once
definitely.
again, basically a whole core of new players, but at the same time Kentucky had the same thing, and look what Mark Pope is doing.
Yeah,
So it's almost a laugh in the face considering he left Kentucky and now Kentucky's a fourth ranked
yeah,
team and
yeah.
with
So
really good wins, which
right,
are hard to ignore. And I will also say the other game I was thinking about, and this one was kind of ignored a lot, but Grand Canyon had a great win against, at the time, an undefeated Stanford. And
yeah,
obviously, on the mid-major watch, we all know that Grand Canyon had a great season last year,
right,
and they're looking to be in a very, very similar spot, not even a better spot, and getting that early uh, Power Five win, especially against what appears to be a decent Stanford team this year, definitely shows the opportunities for this team to grow in future scenarios. So
yeah,
that's a small tidbit that I also found through the complete chaos of what was
yeah,
probably the one of the best feast weeks we've had in a while, and one of the craziest AP polls
right.
that we're looking at right now, which leads me to this question of what do you think about the AP poll?
Well, it's madness. But I mean, that's what college basketball is. That so many teams dropped. There was a lot of risers, but it's chaos right now. There's definitely some teams I think that are on this poll that probably shouldn't be ranked right now. Not throw names out there, but UConn, I don't think they should be ranked. Um, Bias aside, they probably shouldn't be ranked. Um, uh,
I don't get why A
yeah,
and
and
M
just
is
like
ranked. To be real with you,
who was that?
A&M. I know they
A&M,
had
yeah.
like
A&M's kind of a tough one. San Diego State is good. I don't know if I'm a believer. Um, but, yeah. And then I think there's some teams who I think, I understand the way the poll works. You lose, you go down. But, there's some teams that are definitely ranked a little low. That's just how the poll works. And
true, true, and I do think there are a couple teams that might need some testing points. I think Cincy
yeah,
kind of got away with a
right.
really, really easy week, and they haven't really played anybody
Yeah,
legit. They do play Villanova later on or actually later on today from this recording. They play
yeah.
Dayton as well,
I
so
mean,
they have some
they'll be
opportunities,
Nova
but they really won't start facing legit competition until
till conference play.
conference play. So
Yeah.
I don't really know
Um,
anything about them.
yeah, so I
Tennessee's
mean,
kind of in a similar spot, like
Tennessee's in a
three.
similar. Tennessee's tough, but I think Tennessee has a chance to be legit. I mean, Chaz Lanier's looked like one of the best transfers in college basketball. Um,
Yeah, you were
I'm a
definitely very
little,
right on him.
yeah, I'm a little upset. I kind of took him because I initially had him as a potential first team All American going into the season. I kind of shifted over to Zeke Mayo, which I'm not mad about necessarily, but Chaz Lanier definitely has a chance to be in the running for an All American team. D Stone Dubar hasn't really shown much up to this point, but I think he had some personal issues off the court, which he had to attend to, and he hasn't necessarily been playing many games yet with Tennessee. So that's a guy I think you can watch for him to improve going forward and possibly be a breakout player for them. And Zakai Ziegler, what he brings on the defensive side of the ball, just veteran presence, one of the best winners in the sport, and I mean I think, just they definitely have a chance to compete for an SEC title. I don't think they do end up winning the SEC, of course, but definitely a team to watch in that conference.
No, I definitely agree with you, and the team is definitely in a great spot overall. I just think three might be pushing it, but also
Yeah,
they have a great win against Baylor, and the competition was just kind of you know obviously everybody else lost, so they kind of in
right,
this
right.
weird spot. But they'll have the opportunities. They play um, Illinois next week, so they get that great
Yeah, that'll be a good
fight
challenge for them.
against another team that needs to still be proven, in my opinion. And then I think Marquette and Iowa State, they both play this upcoming week as well. They're
Right,
5 and 6.
huge game.
I mean Marquette, great win against Purdue. Don't get me wrong, and same thing with Iowa State with their wins in Maui, but both kind of showed signs of concern, in my opinion. And
Yeah,
both. I mean, legitimately, I don't know if either team is a truly a top 10 team. So this game will
Yeah,
definitely determine which
right.
one really sticks in my mind, at least, on if they're a legit contender or not.
I mean, in my eyes, I think Iowa State is a legit top 10 team. Marquette, I'm not as sure about. For the sake of the Big East, it'd be nice if they were a top 10 team. I just don't know. I think I don't know if you can expect the offensive output from guys like a David Joplin and a Stevie Mitchell to continue going forward. I like they're really good players. I like their games, but I think they go as Cam Jones goes, and if a team's able to contain Cam Jones, because I don't think anyone's able to fully stop Cam Jones. Um, I think if you're able to contain him and shut down, don't give the rest of the team good looks to score, then I think Marquette probably loses to a lot of these teams that fall below them and around them in this poll right now. Just Iowa State, I think, they let that Auburn game get away from them in Maui. But I think defensively they're just so disciplined. They're really good, and offensively, what they have with Tom Lipsey playing the point and um, I forget how to say his name, Mom Silovich or
Oh yeah, Monsilovic definitely has. I mean,
yeah,
he had a great freshman season, which I recall very well. He had a great, honestly, a pretty decent time in Maui. I think his game against Dayton was pretty solid. Um, Personally, I would also lead on the Iowa State side for this game. Um, do I think necessarily this will define anything for either team? Not yet. It's still very early in the season, but also this is a huge quad one win, regardless of how it's
yeah,
looked at,
definitely,
that you cannot really ignore come March.
right,
I think another team that kind of needs to be tested a little bit more is Wisconsin. They kind of really
yeah,
came out
for
of nowhere,
sure,
in my opinion. They're 8-0. They had they have had good wins. I do like their Pitt win, which I think is actually better right now than their Arizona win. But their schedule for this month will really prove it. They play Michigan, Marquette, Illinois, and Butler back to back to back to back.
yeah.
So if they can
So
get some things going with that, that'll prove a lot, and they can really jump because they're already at 11 in the AP poll.
yeah, right. So I mean that'll be a huge stretch coming up for them. And then I want to talk about how do you feel about Kentucky? Because
I
I know
I
going
am
into the
high
year,
on
we
Kentucky.
definitely had really conflicting opinions on how Kentucky was going to do this year. I'm definitely feeling good about my take
I
that I had in our preseason preview. But
They've convinced me.
yeah,
I'll be completely honest with you. Um, I mean, I will say obviously they are still riding off of this Duke win, and we'll see how they do against Clemson. But wow, this team has not had anything to really show concerning. Like they've
right,
had multiple 100-point win games against obviously yes, non-power 5, but that's still solid growth for a team that is entirely based on newcomers. And I mean, yeah, they also play Gonzaga and Louisville later on this month, so we'll have to see how that goes. But
yeah.
this team, this team is four for a reason, and I don't doubt the opportunities that Mark Pope has to make this a one seed team.
Yeah, I mean, this team, they look really good. And like you mentioned, they have a big stretch of games coming up for them that's really going to tell us what kind of team they are. I don't know that I believe they are a legitimate top five team in the nation. I really, really do like what they have in terms of the veterans they have on that team. Of course, the team's pretty much completely transfers. But I just, what concerns me the most about Kentucky is how they don't have a true point guard in my eyes. Jackson Robinson, that is not his game. He's more of a scorer. That's what he did at BYU, coming off the bench for them, I believe. And, he's a scorer. He's instant offense for your team. Lamont Butler, I really, really do like Lamont Butler. Of course, the great run he had at San Diego State, and he's one of the toughest physical defenders in the country. And he's turned himself to a really solid offensive player. His games in that realm has improved greatly over his playing time in college. And but I just don't know if he's able to really fill the duties of playing a point guard as much. And then, I mean, if I'm being fully honest, I haven't been able to closely watch the Kentucky games as much as I would have liked to. But just in the little bit that I have seen, I think they need to do more to get run sets to get Kobe Bryant open and get him the
Oh yeah,
ball.
Kobe Bryant is like a cheat code. He's
Kobe Bryant,
insane.
I wasn't fully sure if Kobe Bryant was going to be able to translate that level of shooting he did at Dayton to the high major level, but I mean, he legit looks like one of the best shooters we're going to see um, come out of college in possibly the last decade. I mean, he's putting himself up there with like the likes of like Jordan Hawkins and I mean, some of the other snipers we've seen
Yeah,
play, and
he's
I
he's
think
having he's
he
having like
has
a
a chance. He has a chance to be a legit NBA prospect. I mean, the dude's 6'7", shoots the lights out, and I mean, he has great size. I definitely think he's going to end up being um, potentially top 40, 45 pick in the this year's
yeah,
draft.
he's like not only is he draftable, he's like a not like a model, but an almost like because I don't necessarily want to compare him to Steph Curry with his shooting levels, but the at the rates he's been going at, it's very Curry-esque
Yeah,
from his time at Davidson, and it definitely compares in my way. And to
yeah,
actually harp on your point, I think Otega Owa fits a great point for point guard. I get it that he hasn't really filled that position, but given the time and effort that they'll have over these next few like weeks in particular, I think he fits in that role so well, and
yeah.
he's definitely proven to me, in particular, that this team has a lot of opportunities, and they're a lot more connected for a bunch of transfers than you'd think.
They definitely have a lot of chemistry going. Which I mean, I don't think anyone expected that. Even I was high on Kentucky going into the season. I didn't think they would play as well together as they have, and you know that just they look like the connectivity they have is great. Um, and I mean, I think they could be legit threat in March. Again, I'm not positive that I believe they're a top five team in the country, but I mean, they look good right now. So
You know what's making me believe they're a top five team? Pitt. Pitt's just giving me these really, really weird signals, and I have to believe them. Like the win against Ohio State was really a shower for me, but also their just general winning record with good wins against what I'm now looking at as far better than they were last week. Their win against West Virginia, which was by 20, was now looking at it really, really good. LSU was a great win. Even their loss against Wisconsin now doesn't really feel the same anymore. And this
yeah,
team really skyrocketed their 18 and 8 people. Like, we look through, the ACC is a lot more open than I thought they were going to be.
definitely wide open.
And is
Yeah,
this
I
team
honestly thought
inconsiderable? Is Pitt really going to put on the a
they could.
possible ACC title run? It's not out of the question.
I mean, yeah, ACC is wide open. I think most people, including me, going into the season, probably thought Duke cakewalks to the ACC, but I think they're going to have a little bit tougher of a time in conference play than I think most people anticipated going into the season.
And I honestly think that on top of just feast week and the same people, I think a lot of these conferences have opened up. Like I
Yeah,
originally, like
definitely.
you told me last week, for like I would have said UConn wins the Big East, Bama wins the SEC, Big 12 goes to Kansas. You know, you can fill in the blanks for everybody
Yeah,
else. Now it's like
it's
almost every conference
it's wide
feels.
open this
I
year,
know, like
and I
UConn obviously doesn't
mean,
have the control.
even at the one spot, like Kansas has probably looked the best out of every team in the country this year, but not by much. I don't think they've really separated themselves the way other teams did at the beginning of last season, like a Purdue, um, I guess like a UConn, like you know, Arizona had points where they looked like a legit best team in the country. Obviously, that was pretty short lived, but you know, Houston, you know, those three really, I feel, separated themselves pretty early on from the rest of the nation and as legitimate contenders for a
Yeah,
title.
there's a lot of
But
parity this year in the
yeah,
league, and I think
which
that's wonderful. We're kind of like, and if Feast Week is anything to show off, we're gonna have a wonderful season ahead of us. Like
definitely,
there is so much we don't know, and that's really making me happy because just talking about it, like we said before, Pitt could be a contender for the ACC. We have completely open ideas about how the SEC is doing and how good they are as a conference. They're probably the best conference right now over the Big
yeah,
12 and Big East. And then even looking at smaller conferences, the Mountain West is coming alive again, which was something I was really wondering about. The A10 is
right,
producing mid majors GCU, even St. Mary's. They're
yeah.
putting in
Drake has played great
Drake.
too.
Drake is putting in some effort that I didn't think I was going to see at all considering they're a whole team of transfers too.
Yeah,
So there's a lot that is going on, and we haven't even scratched the surface
yeah,
considering conference play doesn't start until, for the most part, next week.
definitely.
So
Which kind of brings me to my next question. Obviously, the AP poll is the AP poll, but right now, at this very moment, who do you think looks like the best team in the country right now?
it's like I want to say it's a hard choice, but it's Auburn. Everything points to Auburn. I just can't ignore the opportunities and general playmaking, not just of Johnny Broom and Chad Parker Mazzara, but the entire team. And Bruce Pearl has shown up as a
Yeah,
coach. I know he's had some unfortunate, you know, like losses. Obviously, last year's loss to Yale
right.
was
TL.
heartbreaking for the program, but they're better than Bama. They're better than, honestly, Kentucky. They're better than Tennessee. This team went from being like, maybe a game or two back of Alabama, in my opinion, to being a game or two ahead. Like
Yeah,
they're right now SEC frontrunners and possibly the number one seed overall come
yeah,
March. Like this team went from being ignored to being like they're my final four right now. I would say I don't
yeah,
really know
yeah.
what it
Probably
looks
mine
like,
too.
but like
Um,
I don't really know if they're going to win anything more than that, but this is a great season. This is a great season for them, and
yeah.
that's a lot to say.
Yeah, I mean Auburn is right there for me. I mean, I love Todd Pettiford. I think that kid's legit, and I
Oh,
think
he's
he should.
legit. Wow.
He if he's not a top 10 on draft boards, then I don't know. If he top five even, I mean that kid can shoot it. I mean, and he's not afraid the moment you saw it in the Houston game. He showed up for them, and that kid's legit. I really do like Auburn. For me, I think Gonzaga's the best team in the country right now. I understand they come in at
Really?
seven. I
I
just think
explain.
I just think for me, they addressed the problems they had last year so well with the size of the backcourt. You have size there now. You have, Ryan Nemhard isn't the tallest guard, but he, like you said earlier in this video, he stepped up. He's averaging double digit assists a game. I mean, he's averaging double double right now, points and assists. But then just like the size of their backcourt, they have Michael Ajayi, Steele Venners, Khalif Battle, Dusty Stromer. He might play more on the wing. I'm not positive, but Noah Hickman. Those guys, they bring so much size and they're so hard to stay in front of defensively. And then when they're playing defense, they just like they have that this year. They play This is some of the best defense I've ever seen a Mark Few team play, and I think even more than that team that nearly went undefeated. I think this team gives Mark Few his best chance to win a national championship, and I think Mark Few knows this, and that if he's going to get one in his career, it's going to be this year. And I think he's just all in. Their bigs have been playing great with Graham Ike. I'm trying to remember the guys. It's like Lemke, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I just think Kansas on paper is probably the best constructed roster in terms of like name value, but the guys they have. But Gonzaga just has some dudes, and I think Khalif Battle, a big thing for him and Gonzaga going into this year was if he was going to be willing to accept the role where not every night's going to be his night, where he is the go-to guy that's scoring like he did at Arkansas when he was playing at Temple back, like when he was first coming up in college basketball. But like he's accepted a role of like being able to play defense and not look to score every possession. And I think that was just huge. And I just think I think head to toe. I understand that loss to West Virginia was tough. Not what you're looking for if you're a Zaga fan or if you're Mark Few, but I think they're going to bounce back from that. And I mean, like we talked about in past videos, no one's going to compete with them in West Coast Conference this year. I mean, St. Mary's looks decent. They're probably the only real threat to them. But I mean, let's be honest. I don't think St. Mary's is competing with this Gonzaga roster. And I think they're going to end up as a one seed, potential number one overall. Just because, I mean, I think they have a really good chance to go undefeated in conference play. But I think right now, to me, they look like the best team in college basketball. And that's not a slight to Auburn. Auburn looks really good too. But I'm just thinking down the road. I don't know if Auburn can continue this level of play that they're at right now. And
Interesting.
considering the competition they're going to be playing in the SEC.
I don't know. I mean, listen, I would have agreed with you last week if you told me Gonzaga was giving them one seed. I just don't see it anymore. And I hate to be that guy. I get it, they have great wins. The Baylor win is amazing. Uh Honestly, their win against IU not too good, but it's still a really solid win. The win against San Diego State was solid, but they need to prove themselves, or at least they need to get back to proving themselves the way they were
Yeah, that's
earlier.
fair.
They play Kentucky later on this week. That's a huge one. They play obviously UConn, as you mentioned. They play UCLA. They have obviously a lot of play to go with conference, so we'll see how that actually does shape out. But don't count the Zags. I agree with you,
Yeah,
but I don't. They've kind of fallen off currently. Will it be
yeah,
permanent? Probably not. I think the team definitely has their opportunities out for them, but that loss against West Virginia is really, really putting them down at the moment, and we'll have to see how it goes.
yeah,
But
definitely.
quickly looking onto the matchups, we've kind of touched on, but there's still a lot that I think we definitely should talk about for this upcoming week, which is ACC, SEC, and then Big East versus
Big 12.
Big 12.
Yeah,
That's a
definitely be
great.
some
That's
good
like the
matchups.
final rounds of you know non-conference play, which I think matters just as much as last week because
Yeah, for sure.
there's a lot of good Power Five matchups that need to be talked about. So, what's on your mind right now for those games?
Um, I mean, as a UConn fan, I mean, of course, tomorrow, at the time of this recording tomorrow, it's we got Baylor at Gamble Pavilion, so that's a game I think UConn has to win. You know, their next three games are going to be huge for them. They play Baylor at Gamble tomorrow, Texas in Austin, I believe Sunday, and then they have Gonzaga at the Garden the following week after that. And I mean, yeah, they they dropped three straight in Maui. They got to win the two out of the next three. I think you win two out of the next three, you're fine. You take care of business in Big East play, and you end up with a fairly decent seed going into the tournament. Um, but I think out of those, you know, I would like to hope they beat Texas. I understand it's away, and you're going to be playing against an away crowd, which is a little tougher. Of course, we all know how hard it is winning college basketball, but I mean, let's be honest, this Texas team isn't very good. And I think UConn, that's a must win for UConn. They can't lose that game. And out of the other two, between Baylor and Gonzaga, you just heard me rave about how I think Gonzaga's the best team in the country. I think they have a better chance to beat Baylor than Gonzaga, but Baylor's not going to be easy either. So they need to show up tomorrow. And, you know, you hope that some of their players step up and they, for the love of God, just stop fouling.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I mean, the season is really on the line now. Like this is
Yeah,
turned from an early just easy start to like we're really in a scenario where we could just end up being in a horrible position for
yeah,
March, if not even missing it entirely at the rate that they're going, which I don't expect at all. But the
yeah,
opportunity is now there. I think there's honestly a lot of secretly good games that will pop up today, or as of recording today. Kentucky plays basically a trap game at Clemson. Clemson's had a
yeah,
great season so far. They're playing in Clemson too, so they have the home field advantage. And this is once again a really big proving point for Kentucky. They get their win here. That shows a lot of why they're a four seed or number four. If they don't, there's a lot of concerns going. I
yeah,
also think that, like I said, for Iowa State and Marquette's a great game. I think Alabama UNC is a proving point for both teams. That's a
definitely.
huge, huge one. Duke and Auburn is another massive battle. Like once again,
Yeah,
proving point for Duke in particular, but Auburn obviously as well.
right.
Um, I think we touched upon Illinois a little bit with their game against Tennessee, and then uh, obviously the Big Ten was kind of left out of these bigger games, but I think the Big Ten has some great opportunities. Purdue plays Texas A&M and Auburn later on this week, so they have a little bit of an SEC game going ahead. And if Auburn shows some weaknesses against Duke, there is a concern that they lose to Purdue. We can see Purdue back in a scenario where they were last year or the year before that, where they just randomly wind up being a number one team for like a week or so, or even longer, depending on how things go.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, definitely some big games coming up this week for sure. And I mean, just what a season's been so far. This has been arguably one of the best starts to a college basketball season that we got in a long time. And I'm just super excited for these super high key matchups coming up in the next week or 2 weeks. And then, of course, we all love it once it gets into conference play and all these in conference rivalries begin to boot up. So I think that's going to take care of everything today for this video. I think we're going to look to do a video just talking about some of the transfers in college basketball this year. I know a lot of big transfers that were hyped up in the portal haven't really been playing to their best up to this point. And so we're going to talk about who's been some of the better transfers so far this year, and also some of the best freshmen playing this year so far around college basketball. But of course, if you like the content you see on this channel, if you want to see more, tell your friends about it. Rate, review, subscribe, engage with the content any way you can. It all helps with the algorithm on YouTube, and that's going to be taking care of everything for today. So until next video, we'll see you all next time.
See you guys.